Hello, 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 and welcome back to Alice Talks Football, and welcome back to another live Manchester United news, transfer news, and update show. A lot to talk about. Newcastle sending a big bid for Benjamin Cesco, but Cesco has not decided on Newcastle United yet, although apparently they're set to offer him mega wages. So despite his preference believed to be Manchester United, Newcastle apparently set to offer mega wages and go big to get this deal over the line. Cesco has to choose between United and Newcastle. And let's see if this triggers Manchester United's hand to do something. Could Hojlund be involved in the deal? Could Manchester United be bidding up for Benjamin Cesco? We're going to talk about the latest on that. Hayden Hackney, 15 million deal agreed between Middlesbrough and Ipswich. He has rejected Ipswich. There's talk of United hijack. Why has he rejected Ipswich? Is he expecting a move from somebody else? But we're going to talk mostly about Benjamin Cesco, some links about Alejandro Garnacho to Aston Villa we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Benjamin Cesco, Villa, Garnacho. We're going to talk about the midfield situation. We're going to talk about Hayden Hackney. And we've got a few things to talk about. But first of all, I want to touch upon just the general on Benjamin Cesco. And there was a lot of reports that came out last night, and a lot of Newcastle fans were getting very giddy because a Slovenian reporter, who no one had heard of, with about 300 followers, came out and said that Benjamin Cesco had agreed personal terms with Newcastle United and chosen Newcastle United. So a lot of Newcastle fans got giddy about that. Man United fans started melting down on the timeline because of this guy with about 300 followers that nobody knew who he was. Then you had Sacha Taverley, who again had told us that Manchester United was signing Luis Campos and has given us loads of exclusives on Manchester United, which are not true. So, again, there was a lot of exclusives apparently on Man United that are not true that were said by Sacha Taverley. And then he said that Benjamin Cesco had chosen Newcastle over Manchester United last night. So there was a couple of sources, none of them which were credible when it comes to Man United or Newcastle news came out last night, and it said that personal terms were agreed. Cesco had chosen Newcastle, but David Ornstein and Romano have confirmed that those stories are not true. So the reports that came out late last night about Cesco choosing Newcastle is not true. Romano says he still hasn't made a decision, but there was obviously a few people on the timeline freaking out that Cesco had rejected us for Newcastle. There was a few Newcastle fans getting giddy, but it was not. They were not credible links. So Cesco has not chosen Newcastle as of yet. That doesn't mean he won't choose Newcastle, but that news that came out last night from Sasha and from the Slovenian source was just guesswork. And I think the problem is Newcastle wants Cesco really badly. So they want to believe any positive news about Cesco to Newcastle, but also Liverpool want Newcastle to get Cesco because they believe it means they'll get Isak. So every time there's a story about Newcastle getting closer to Cesco, all the Liverpool fans keep running that story. So there was Liverpool sources trying to act like apparently Cesco had chosen Newcastle over Liverpool, which was weird because Liverpool were never in for Cesco. So it was basically last night a load of fake news on Cesco. The news that came out last night that Cesco joins Newcastle or chosen to join Newcastle was fake news. He might still choose to join Newcastle. Apparently, Newcastle are willing to give him higher wages than we are because they're so desperate to do the deal. So he might still choose Newcastle. But as of now, from Romano and Ornstein, he's not chosen Newcastle. But Newcastle put in a bid, and we're going to touch upon that. Look, I'd go for Mateta over Cesco. I really would, but I don't think it's going to happen. A word from Leipzig this morning is he's given Newcastle the green light. He's been left out of the team and says he's leaving to teammates. Again, not credible. That's the thing. He might have, but until we get Ornstein or Romano or a tier one source confirm it, it is difficult to believe. Because there was a lot of news last night that Cesco had chosen Newcastle and it just wasn't credible. But I want to break into the Cesco news and I want to get into the Hayden Hackney news and give you my thoughts on everything that's gone on there. I still think there's a strong possibility Cesco could go to Newcastle because I think Newcastle are in a stronger financial position to give Leipzig and Cesco what they want. And I think Newcastle are financially stronger than us right now, especially with the money that might come in if they sell Isak, which means Newcastle can give him ridiculous wages and can pay a lot of money. But David Ornstein did say this. Newcastle United submit offer to RB Leipzig for Benjamin Cesco. Newcastle made a bid in the last 24 hours, which was worth 75 plus 5, around the asking price that RB Leipzig informed suitors they want. Now, this is a problem. Manchester United wanted to get Cesco for about 70 to 75 million euros in total. They've basically bidded 80 million in total, and Manchester United wanted to do it for 70 million in total. So it already means Manchester United will now have to pay up more than they originally would now that Newcastle have bidded for Cesco, because that's probably put the price up a bit, which they won't like. But Newcastle have made a bid. They've made a 65 plus £5 million bid, so they've made a £70 million bid in total. And it's all ongoing, but Cesco's not made a decision on this. He's not agreed to join Newcastle, but he's not turned them down yet. He's not made a decision on this, but he has received a bid from Newcastle, a big bid, and this will put pressure on Manchester United to respond. Whether they do a deal with Hojlund going the other way, whether they make a bid will be interesting. But Newcastle is showing Cesco, we're serious. This is Newcastle's way of saying to Cesco, we're serious, we want you, we're not going to F about like Manchester United, we're going to pay the price it takes to get you, and we'll do it. Whereas Manchester United are like, oh, can we explore a Hojlund deal? We might take a while on this. So I think this is Newcastle's attempt to get Cesco to pick them by showing that they're ready, they can get the deal done now. Whereas if United, he could be waiting till the end of the window if he chooses Manchester United. But Manchester United obviously want Cesco. They're looking at Cesco. Cesco apparently gave them a verbal green light that Man United was his preference and he wanted the move. Let's see what happens there. But Newcastle have made a bid. Would Newcastle make a bid without any kind of encouragement that the player wants to move? I doubt it. I feel like Newcastle must have got some encouragement from Benjamin Cesco to make a bid, but Newcastle also made a bid for João Pedro and he chose Chelsea. So Newcastle have made bids for players already this window and they didn't go to Newcastle. They made a bid for Ekitike, they made a bid for João Pedro, they're now making a bid for Benjamin Cesco. I'd assume they wouldn't make a bid for Benjamin Cesco without encouragement from the player, but again, we don't know that because they've made bids for 3 different players this window that didn't end up at Newcastle. I'm just going to get my water, be with you in 1 sec. I say water, but there's like that much left in it. But my throat is so dry. Everton. We play Everton Sunday, yeah. Ben Jacobs has tweeted to remind people that Newcastle are always going to hit even without an agreement between them and Cesco, yeah. But the thing that's weird is you've got to see it from both sides. Man United fans, we're going to see what we want to see in the news. And Newcastle fans are going to see what they want to see in the news. So all the Newcastle aggregator accounts were tweeting out really unreliable info that Cesco had chosen Newcastle because they want to believe it. They want some positivity. But at the same time, there was sources that were quite credible that said Newcastle wouldn't make a bid for Cesco unless they received some encouragement from the player. And Newcastle have now made a bid for Cesco. So I'd assume that Newcastle have received some kind of encouragement from Cesco. But then these sources are backtracking saying, well, Newcastle have made a bid, but they still don't know if Cesco wants to come. So I can see why Newcastle fans are frustrated with the news because it looks like the media is backtracking on what they said. I assume Newcastle would have received some kind of encouragement from Benjamin Cesco to make a bid, but at the same time, they would have. I just think they did bid for João Pedro, they did bid for Ekitike, and they didn't get a deal done. So it's an interesting one. I do think, and I'm going to be honest, I don't think Cesco is as nailed onto Man United as other people. Other people think because the mainstream has told us that Cesco's preference is Man United and he prefers Man United and that we're going to bid for him soon. I think a lot of people in the Man United space feel that we're going to get Cesco. Yeah? But I'm not that confident. I'm going to lie. I'm not that confident. You know, there's a lot of unreliable reports saying he's going to choose Toon. None of them are reliable. But I do think Newcastle apparently have offered him a massive wage. And a massive contract and are ready to offer a massive fee to do a deal. And I think Newcastle want him more than us. And I think that could persuade Cesco to go to Newcastle. I think, yeah, he might prefer United, but if we're not willing to give him the same terms as Newcastle and we're waiting to sell Hojlund to finance a deal, he may go to Newcastle. Look, I think Cesco is good. I would like Cesco at Manchester United. If we don't sign him, I'm actually not that bothered. But it's an interesting one. So I want to get into the news on that and just tell you what's happening. But if we don't get Cesco, we probably end up with Watkins, and I'm not going to complain. So yeah, obviously the news came in that Newcastle made a bid for Cesco, which is about 65 million plus 5. United could afford this in instalments, but I think United's best way to match this is to include Rasmus Hojlund in the deal. Now, Benjamin Jacobs said that Newcastle's plan was always to bid for Benjamin Cesco. Even without an agreement for the player to join. So he's now backtracking. Now, Ben Jacobs did suggest that Newcastle would only bid if they received encouragement from the player. Newcastle bid, and he's now saying that Newcastle were always going to bid even without an agreement from the player to join. That could mean they've not got an agreement with him to join, but maybe they've received encouragement. It can mean things. But Man United are working on a deal, working on Cesco himself buying into the project. So the media, who said 2 days ago that Cesco prefers Manchester United to Newcastle, are now saying Cesco hasn't made a decision. So I do think there's a slight backtrack in the media, which makes me think there's a strong possibility he could join Newcastle. Is the sound okay? I don't know. Anyway, thank you very much, Nick, for the super chat. My only concern right now is that one of the Slovenian top journos last night said Cesco had chosen Newcastle, betting was suspended, then Newcastle bid put in. Yes, I mean, Newcastle put a bid in. I'm sure if Cesco had said no, they wouldn't have put a bid in. They must have got some kind of encouragement that Cesco's open to a move. I think that's what I think. Like, some Man United fans think, well, he prefers us, so it's nailed on. I think that Newcastle could convince him to join. I think Newcastle want him more. The fact that Newcastle put a bid in, the fact that Newcastle are willing to offer him big wages, I think things could change. I also think that Newcastle wouldn't put a bid in without encouragement for the player. The one thing I will say is it a top Slovenian journalist? Because he had about 300 followers, and then a Newcastle account just said he was a top Slovenian journalist, and a lot of people went along with it. Is he actually a top Slovenian journalist, or are people just believing him because they want to believe him? Liverpool fans want to believe it, Newcastle fans want to believe it. But I do think, again, the source could be correct. He could have chosen Newcastle, but right now he hasn't. So the reports that came out yesterday that he's chosen Newcastle were not true, because Ornstein and Romano would have said something by now had he chosen Newcastle. That's not to mean he won't join Newcastle. We could get an announcement in an hour that he's chosen Newcastle and Newcastle's his next club. We could get that announcement in an hour. We could get that announcement in 2 days. I think there's a strong possibility he could go to Newcastle, but he's not chosen Newcastle as of yet. Like, that's the current situation. He's not sat there and gone, yeah, Newcastle's what I want. But I think he's maybe given them some encouragement. Now, this is what's been said. Cesco has not decided his next club yet, and Benjamin Cesco has not chosen any club. Today's reports in the media are not accurate. So it's been said as well by the media that the reports that he's chosen Newcastle are not accurate, and that he has 3 options, which is Leipzig, Man United, and Newcastle, but he's not made a decision. He could choose to stay at Leipzig. Arsenal thought they were going to get Cesco last summer, and he chose to stay at Arsenal. So he could just choose to stay at Leipzig as well. You never know. Toon big came in hours ago and no news. I don't think he wants Newcastle. I don't know. I think if Newcastle gave him a certain wage package, he'd say yes. And Newcastle apparently willing to offer more in wages than Manchester United to do this deal. So it's a possibility. It's a possibility he goes to Newcastle, but they've made the bid and he's not accepted that. He's not agreed to go to Newcastle yet, but he's not also agreed to go to United yet. So I just think Newcastle must have had some encouragement to make a bid like that. That's a big bid. Or maybe Newcastle thought if we make a big bid, he'll realise how keen we are on him and he might choose us over Man United. Because the mainstream's still reporting his preference is Man United, but he hasn't made a decision. And we had that with Delap. His preference is Chelsea, but he hasn't made a decision. We had that with Gyökeres. His preference is Arsenal, he hasn't made a decision. But maybe the mainstream are guessing that his preference is Man United. Maybe his preference isn't Man United. How is Jadon Sancho? In talks with Dortmund, nothing in advance. Where do you think Cesco will go? I mean, apparently he prefers United, so I'd guess Manchester United. But I wouldn't be shocked if he went to Newcastle. I really wouldn't be shocked if he went to Newcastle. But a lot of people act like they would be. Oh, big up to Vitek, by the way. Vitek's made his debut for Bristol City today and saved a penalty. So big up to our goalkeeper Vitek today. But let's continue on into the news. Might be suggestive of their ESAT plans may go extra aggressive on Cesco. Exactly. I also think, look, Newcastle have Champions League football. Newcastle have a more stable project. And if ESAT goes, Cesco is the number 9. No one to compete with for game time. He's the guy in a transition environment. Gets to play Champions League. I don't like a lot of Man United fans think Cesco prefers us, Newcastle are done, Newcastle out of it easy. I don't think it's like that. I know that Mbeumo and Cunha rejected Newcastle for us, but they were lifelong Man United fans. I think Newcastle offer him a nice wage packet. They got Champions League football. They present him a good project. If we got a news story that came out tonight or tomorrow that Benjamin Cesco had chosen Newcastle, I wouldn't be shocked. Apparently he prefers United, but we can't trust the media. The media told us that we had an agreement with Mbeumo 4 weeks before we actually did. We can't trust the mainstream media. He likes United, he likes Newcastle, he's not made a decision. The reports that he's chosen Newcastle are not true as of yet. That doesn't mean he won't choose Newcastle. Newcastle, I think, want him more. They've made a bid. He's seen the bid. They've made the bid, so Cesco sees the bid. Cesco could choose Newcastle. We just don't know. They've got more money than us. They have got more money than us. But I want to talk about Hojlund because I think our best way of doing doing a deal for Cesco, is maybe Hojlund going the other way. But some reports say that Hojlund doesn't want to leave. I think we'll lose this one, Alice. Money talks too loudly. He'll probably have a release clause in there, potentially. Newcastle have more money than us. Why would he choose United over Newcastle? Ask Cunha and Mbeumo that. I mean, I think Newcastle's a better fit for him. I like Cesco. If we get Cesco, I'm happy. If we don't get Cesco, I'm also not too bothered. I think Newcastle's a really good move for him. I think it'd be a really good project for him. It's not the end of the world for me if we don't get Cesco. But some clubs do pick Man United over Newcastle recently. I think just the name. Newcastle's more stable, but Man United just got this name. Media also said Toon out of the race a few days ago. This is the thing. The Newcastle-based journalist suggested that Newcastle are walking away from the deal just 2 days later for Newcastle to make a bid. So again, there's a part of me that thinks maybe Newcastle have got some indication from Cesco he is open for the move, because why else would they make a bid? Unless it's to put pressure on Cesco to change his mind and go to Newcastle to say that they want him more than United. Maybe. But we finished 15th, no Champions League football. Who could go to Newcastle? He could. Oh, I'm so tired. Anyway, let's talk about Rasmus Hojlund. Understand Manchester United will let Hojlund go. They want 30 million for him, and talks are ongoing. Leipzig dream of doing a move for Hojlund. Leipzig want Hojlund. They would like Hojlund in return for Cesco. Hojlund's valued at 30 million. Cesco's valued at 65 million. It's a case of probably Hojlund plus 30 million to do a deal for Cesco. Let me know your thoughts on that. But one thing that's interestingly mentioned is there's a lot of clubs in talks with Hojlund. United are willing to let him go. Hojlund himself has said many times he does not want to leave Manchester United. But if you sign Cesco, you have Xerxes, he's further down the pecking order. He realises he's not going to get a lot of minutes. His stance of I don't want to leave Manchester United is likely to change. RB Leipzig are interested in Manchester United striker Hojlund and have explored the conditions of a loan move. For me, I don't mind doing a loan move if Cesco went on loan the other day, but if that's not the case, then I would rather do a permanent sale so we've got the money in. But RB Leipzig are interested in striker Hojlund, and I think the fact that we're interested in Cesco, I think if we do get Cesco, unlike Newcastle that have given Leipzig the asking price they want, I think we will go under that asking price, and I think we will go under the asking price for Hojlund, but include Hojlund in the swap deal for Cesco. I don't know if United can afford to spend 70 million on Benjamin Cesco. I think if we spread it across 4 years, we could, but I don't know if United can actually spend 70 million on Benjamin Cesco. So I think United's plan is to hopefully use Hojlund in a swap deal to get the price down. The problem is Hojlund might not want the move. Newcastle can't agree 300k Isak contract ex Cesco. I mean, I think Isak will probably go and Cesco if Cesco comes in. But imagine them both together, that would be good. The Cesco story's boring. But apparently Paul Mitchell pulled the plug on an Isak contract. I am absolutely knackered. I don't know what it is. I've had sleep. I just get tired when I go live. I feel like it's a psychology thing. Sometimes I go live and I just get tired and my mind just goes. I'd rather loan Rasmus. Have a feeling he's going to hit form. Do you know what's mad? It's a weirdly agree with you. There's a part of me that's just like, I don't really want to loan Rasmus. I'd like money for him. Like, I'd like 40 million for Rasmus. That would be great. I'd be happy. But if we're doing some kind of swap deal, I'm open to a Hojlund loan because I think Hojlund could go to RB Leipzig and be really good. The thing is, I feel like if Hojlund, I'm not against a Hojlund loan because I think if he goes out on loan, he could be really good. But I'd also like 40 million for Hojlund so we can invest it elsewhere. But RB Leipzig are interested in Hojlund. They are. Guys, give me 1 minute. I'm just going to fill up this. I'll be back in 1 minute. Alice is back. My body does this thing where sometimes I just zone out and I lose concentration, and I was like going live, but then I kept losing my train of thought. So if I just run up and down the stairs and sip some water, it just wakes me up, because there's been about 3 times in this live stream I was about to say something and I've lost my train of thought, which is probably why I've repeated stuff. So I do apologise if I repeated stuff this stream, but my mind, whenever I'm tired, my mind zones out and I'll be like, Rasmus Hojlund, and I'm trying to think where I was at. So I thought if I just run up and down the stairs, swig a bit of water, it will wake me up so we can actually get through the news. So let's just get straight to the point. Newcastle made a bid for Cesco and they hit Leipzig's asking price. So Leipzig will accept that bid. But Cesco has not decided if he wants to go to Newcastle. Now, Ben Jacobs was saying Newcastle's plan was always to bid for Cesco, even without an agreement for the player to join. However, other sources have suggested that Newcastle wouldn't make a bid without encouragement. Cesco must have given some kind of encouragement to Newcastle that if they hit certain terms, he's open to joining the project. Because, yeah, but then Newcastle bid for Ekitike, they didn't get him. Newcastle bid for João Pedro, they didn't get him. The players chose elsewhere, so Newcastle could be bidding for Cesco, but the player might just want elsewhere. It could be that. But I think Newcastle must have had some kind of encouragement from Cesco to make a bid. However, just yesterday or 2 days ago, Newcastle-based sources were suggesting that Newcastle were going to walk away because Cesco preferred United. But Leipzig might put pressure on Cesco to go to Newcastle because Newcastle are going to give them the better financial offer. All we can do to give Leipzig what they want is involve Hojlund in a deal. But if Hojlund doesn't want to leave, that's going to be hard. As of now, Cesco has not chosen between Manchester United and RB Leipzig. Manchester United obviously are looking at potentially moving on Rasmus Hojlund. It's not known if the player wants to go, but Leipzig are interested in Hojlund. Now, the problem with this Hojlund-Leipzig situation is there's some reports saying that Hojlund wants to stay at United unless United communicate to him that they want him to leave. I think if we signed Cesco, we'd communicate to Hojlund that we want him to leave. But Hojlund's very much off the stance of, I don't want to leave Manchester United. Do you know what I mean? So that's the situation there. So we're more alive now. Swap Hojlund for Cesco, get a deal done. We need to get an agreement with Cesco first, though. We'd need to get an agreement with Cesco first to do a deal. But look, we'll have to wait and see. We have to wait and see what happens. But in my honest opinion, I think it could go either way. I'm bored of talking about the whole Cesco situation. I'm bored of it. It's getting annoying. It's Man United, it's Newcastle. Apparently he prefers Man United, but Newcastle are pushing and pushing. Do you know what this gives me? Lenny Yoro energy. Lenny Yoro preferred Man United to Real Madrid. Lenny Yoro 100% preferred Real Madrid to Man United. Lenny Yoro 100% preferred Real Madrid to Man United. And he waited for Real Madrid, and that's why Liverpool walked away. And Man United went and paid Lille what they wanted for Lenny Yoro, presented Lenny Yoro with some nice wages with Rio Ferdinand to give him a chat so they could use Alan Shearer to convince Benjamin Cesco. And we ended up getting Lenny Yoro, and Real Madrid ended up taking an L on that. And I tell you what, Real Madrid would have really needed Lenny Yoro last season with the injuries that they had at the back. So just because Lenny Yoro always preferred Madrid, he went to Man United because we paid up the money. We showed more ambition to get him. We let him speak to Rio. Newcastle could do the same. They're paying up the money. They're showing some ambition. They could get Shearer to speak to him and say, look, I'm the best Premier League striker of all time if we're talking of goals scored. It's a possibility. It's a possibility. So, yeah, Cesco hasn't made a choice. It feels like he prefers United, but if Newcastle are willing to give him bigger wages, you never know. I think right now, it's 60% he goes to Man United, 40% he goes to Newcastle, but I couldn't go any higher than 60-40 in our favour. I think we've got to remember this. I'll see what's reported on the Newcastle side of the media, and they always report things that make Newcastle look good or make it look like Newcastle's closer than other sides. But the Man United media also do the same. If you read it from the Man United perspective, what Man United media put out, they tell us all the good about Cesco, no matter the source. And the Newcastle media tell them all the good about Cesco, no matter the source, until Romano or Ornstein say otherwise. So if you look at the reports from both sides, he prefers United, but he's not chosen. And Newcastle are presenting this project. But yeah, Cesco, we'll have to wait and see. I think with this Newcastle bid puts some serious pressure on Man United. This Newcastle bid puts some serious pressure on Man United to go and make a bid or do something now. It'll be interesting to see if Manchester United now act. It will be interesting to see if we now act. But I want to move on to midfield. I want to move on to other topics because I'm bored. And I feel like until Cesco makes a decision, everything's irrelevant. Until Cesco makes a decision, everything's relevant. So let's talk about other stuff. Duncan Castle said there was potential for a deal to be done between Villa and Garnacho. I think Garnacho has chosen Chelsea, set on Chelsea, is waiting for Chelsea. But look, if Chelsea are going to give Man United what they want and Villa are, Garnacho may have to choose between Chelsea and Villa. There's potential for Garnacho and Villa, but it looks Chelsea bound. It looks like Chelsea are going to make a bid. Vivel and Amarin are now pushing for Sesko, but we've also inquired about Colomboani. If we don't get Cesco, we will look at Colomboani, we'll look at Watkins, and we'll look at Jackson. And look, I like Cesco. I'd like to land Cesco. That's who the club wants. But look, at the end of the day, I don't want to break the bank for Cesco when we still need a midfielder and a goalkeeper. If we don't get Cesco and we end up with Ollie Watkins, it's not exactly a bad thing. It's more that, if United want this guy and the scouts are sure this is the guy, then let's hope we get the guy. But I ain't paying, much more than for him. The Newcastle bid's quite pricey. So it'll be interesting to see if United can match that. So that's what's been said. Colomboani could be one to watch, but there's still a feeling he will go to Juventus. Leipzig haven't accepted Newcastle bid. That's because the player hasn't decided yet. Or maybe they're waiting for a bidding war. Maybe they haven't accepted to see if Man United will bid more. Do you know what I mean as well? But the player hasn't decided, so that's why they're not going to accept the bid. Because the player hasn't decided. But I think Newcastle putting in that bid is a message to Cesco of we're ready to make that move. But United are looking at midfielders. Romano has confirmed this. United are well and truly in the midfield market, looking at midfielders, and we could make a move for a midfielder. So let's get into this. United is seriously considering adding one more midfielder in the case of a good opportunity. Internal talks are focused on this position, not only striker and goalkeeper. But Romano said if there's a good opportunity, we'll look at midfield. Opportunity. So, Hayden received a 15 million bid plus 5 million add-ons from Ipswich for Hayden Hackney, and they accepted that. Hayden Hackney breaking, this came out just now, Hayden Hackney has rejected the opportunity to move to Ipswich. The Borough midfielder held talks with Ipswich, but has turned down the move and he's on the bench for the friendly. So Hayden Hackney is obviously available on the market. Good young midfielder, available on the market. Do you know what I mean? That's what United are looking at. Bid accepted, 15 million, Ipswich. He said no to Ipswich. Why has he said no to Ipswich? A, is he holding out for a better move? Or B, is he just happy at Middlesbrough? I think A, he's holding out for a better move because there's interest in him in the Premier League. Now, United are considering a shock hijack of Ipswich Town midfielder Hayden Hackney. You add that to the context of what Romano says, that United are considering adding one more midfielder in case of a good opportunity. I don't think Hayden Hackney is the best midfielder in the world. I could name 10 midfielders that would be better signed for us than Hayden Hackney. But Hayden Hackney available for £15 million on the market isn't bad business. Because if Hayden Hackney comes in and he's not good enough, well, we spent 15 million on Dan James, we sold him for 25, 30 million. Hayden Hackney, we could still sell and make a good amount of money on. He's not costly. He's not on high wages. If it doesn't work, we can sell on for a bit of money. But United are considering a hijack. He's rejected Ipswich. I don't think he'd reject Manchester United when you're at Middlesbrough. Good midfielder, work with Michael Carrick. Michael Carrick can put in a good word. Progressive midfielder, takes care of the ball. Most touches, most defensive duels won, most progressive carries, most passes completed, most forward passes, most short passes, most progressive passes into final third, most accurate passes. He's also physically good. Amarin wants players that can play at the right physicality, but also good on the ball among all the under-23 midfielders. He played for Middlesbrough against Chelsea. He was very, very good in that game. He played for Middlesbrough against Sunderland, who are now in the Premier League. He was man of the match in that game. I like Hayden Hackney. If you've only got 20 million to spend on a midfielder, you're not going to get much better than Hayden Hackney. Would I prefer Baleva? Yes. Would I prefer Adam Wharton? Yes. Are we going to get them this summer? No. So I do look at Hayden Hackney and say, this is an opportunity. But as Malp said, we are considering FC. Consider this, consider that. Where's the action? Where's the money coming from? I assume potential sales of Garnacho is projected. Again, another one. But look, we don't have the money for an expensive midfielder, but we might have the money for someone like Hackney. Hackney will be Sander Burge all over again. Good players, but fans who don't watch football will say he plays for Middlesbrough. They said that Burge and Burnley They said this with Burge and Burnley, and Burge is better than Agate. You know what? Sander Burge was really good for Fulham last season, and I liked Sander Burge, and I said for value for money, it's not a bad deal. But our fan base freaked out when we were linked to Sander Burge last year, and they got annoyed. And Sander Burge did have a better season than Agate last year. I think Agate is better than he gets credit for online. I don't think Agate is bad. I think his legs are important. But you make a point. Sander Burge wasn't a big name. He's gone to Fulham, was really good at Fulham last season. Everybody was freaking out when we linked to Sander Burge. But you're right. I think Hayden Hackney, people won't like it. People saying, why are we going near a Championship player that no Premier League club wants? Well, Gyökeres was in the Championship 2 years ago, and no Premier League club were going for Victor Gyökeres. And look at him now. You know, look at him now. Look at Adam Wharton from the Championship. Look at Eze from the Championship. Look at Elise from the Championship. I'm not saying that Hayden Hackney is going to come into Manchester United and change us and be the best midfielder in the world. He could flop. He could be bad. He could not be ready for the level. But I'm thinking for £15 million, if it doesn't work, you can get your money back pretty much the next year. And he could be the next thing. And he is a good player from what I've watched. And he could be a good midfielder and he can progress the ball and he's good on the ball. And I think if we're looking at a midfield market opportunity, we want Baleba. Buying Hackney for 15 million still gives us the funds to go big on Baleba next season. I think it makes sense. I think it makes sense. A lot of people talking about Cesco. Again, not been linked to Cesco. So I don't think much will go on there. Not been linked to him. We've been linked to Javi Guerrera. We've been linked to Hayden Hackney. We were linked to Jasari, but he's set to go to AC Milan. They're the midfielders we've been linked to. We probably will get linked to Edison again. We'll probably get linked to Ndidi again. They're the names we'll be linked to. Plenty of Championship players stepped up and did well in the Premier League. They have. Amrin wanted Watkins. It's Vibble who wanted Cesco. True. 15 million. I just think 15 million. Take a punt on Hayden Hackney for 15 million. I think you've got to look at it. I'm not saying that Hayden Hackney and the men's are the kind of guys that are going to change United and be insane signings. They might just not be good enough. But I think value for money, if we haven't got a lot of money, it's something to look at. If we could get Baleba, I would be like, go away, Hayden Hackney. We're going for Baleba, but we can't get Baleba. We can't afford it. Interesting comment here. Sesko is waiting for a bigger club than Manchester United and Newcastle, failing which he will decide to stay at Leipzig or go Newcastle, says Cahill. He could decide to stay at Leipzig. He did that when Arsenal went in for him. He could stay another year at Leipzig. It's a no-brainer if they want Hojlund. Put him on the plane to Germany. Why would you be manifesting him going to Newcastle? But Wild, not going to lie. I just think I'm just trying to be realistic. I think Newcastle could get him. I think for me, get Cesco and involve Hojlund in a deal so we don't have to spend that much money to get Cesco in. Cool, great business, well done, Man United. But Newcastle put their bid in. Newcastle are willing to offer him some nice wages. Newcastle very ambitiously pushing Cesco. Cesco could upset Newcastle. If Man United don't step up in the next few hours and make a move for Cesco and show that they want him as much as Newcastle do, we might pick Newcastle. I'm just trying to be realistic. I think there's no decisions been made yet. There's a feeling he will choose Man United, but there's no guarantee he'll choose him. Garnacho to Villa. Villa, there's something ongoing there, but I think he's waiting for Chelsea, which is a shame. I think Villa would maybe give us more money for it. Guerrero Links not even hiding about a new contract. Yeah. I think Guerrero Links is a lot of its new contract based to get him the best new contract deal we can. Hackney and Agome double pivot works, or Casadou and Hackney, Douglas Luiz, Casadou, Agome also work. I think they're all options that could potentially be available on the market. All options. Do you think we could beat Newcastle for Cesco? Yes, because we're Man United and we're actually a bigger side than Newcastle. But Newcastle in a stronger financial position. They have Champions League football. And I do think Cesco fits in better at Newcastle than Manchester United. So, yeah, that's one thing. If they get Cesco, could we get Sandro Tonali? I wish, but that's not going to happen. I'd love Sandro Tonali. Sandro Tonali would be perfect for United, but that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Romano. Manchester United will submit an offer for Cesco once they get his approval. So United are ready to make a bid for Cesco. Is now reports coming out, but they need to get his approval first. Yeah. So let's break everything down. Newcastle have made a bid. Man United are now set to make a bid. Cesco hasn't chosen yet. Unreliable sources said he agreed terms with Newcastle, but Romano and Ornstein basically rubbished that the next day. The There is talk about Leipzig being involved in the deal. About Hojlund being involved in the deal for Cesco, but Hojlund doesn't want Leipzig. But Slovenian sources are saying Cesco will choose Newcastle. But English and Tier 1 sources are saying that's not the case. As of yet, he's not made a decision. Basically, in other words, if Man United are willing to make a bid for Cesco, let's see what Cesco decides. Let's see what Cesco decides. Yeah? Let's see. I'd love Tonali. Tonali would be the perfect midfielder for us, but we're not getting him. We're not getting him. But apparently we're going to make a bid for Cesco, but actually it's really not that much new. It's not that much new, actually. We do need to make a bid. We should make a bid to show Cesco we're also serious about getting him. I don't think we can bid as much as Newcastle bid. That's the problem. I don't know. I think we want him for less than what Newcastle bid, which might be difficult now. Newcastle bid at that amount, even if he chooses us. So yeah, we're just sitting here, and Cesco's got a choice to make. Hayden Hackney could be an opportunity there. Will be interesting to see if Man United make a move. Garnacho has interest from Villa, but he looks Chelsea bound. That is the news. Guys, thank you for watching. I do apologise for zoning out a bit this live stream. See you next time. Bye.